Hello.
Thank you for being here, and we will begin our presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Ooh. Okay. Can everyone see?
The spinny wheel of death thingy.
Okay, one moment. So
do you have the same thing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I see that it's loading.
Do you have any other apps or tabs open?
No, I just have Chrome. Just Chrome.
Oh, so you're using Chrome. Maybe try stopping the share and start it again. I'll try contacting.
A lot. So sorry, everyone. Okay. So, gotcha. That was just a simulation. That was just an example that we wanted to show you of a technical issue that has been happening more frequently anytime people are video conferencing. And these are the types of technical issues that are among the problems that we hope to help you resolve. So we are in DVICE, and VICE stands for Virtual Innovative Community Engagement. We are a group of AmeriCorps public allies who were asked by the INRC to determine how COVID-19 has impacted the ways people engage with their communities and to present solutions. And now I will pass it off to Haley.
Thank you. I wanted to let you all know what you can look forward to hearing from us today. So starting off, we'll be briefly reviewing what the old normal was like for some communities in Indianapolis. Next, we will talk about what disturbed the old normal and what problems came from that. From there, we will discuss the finding from interviews our team conducted with various neighborhood leaders. And then we will give a brief overview of the solutions for engaging with marginalized communities, addressing accessibility issues, Zoom issues, using social media, building community and wellness, and even some less computer-based solutions. Finally, we'll let you know what's next from us, and we'll get some feedback from you all for what some of our next steps should be. If you have any questions during any part of this presentation, please type it in the Q&A section, and we will most likely be able to answer it at the end. With all that being said, buckle up, and we will get started with our presentation. Back to you, Brandy.
Thank you, Haley. So although we've spent a whole year now in this pandemic, can any of you still envision how things used to be as clearly as if it was only yesterday? What did community engagement look like for you before the pandemic? Can you relate to a picture? Yes. Here, Ashley Weaver is speaking with members of the Community Heights neighborhood. This picture was taken at the INRC 3 years ago, and as you can see, it's giving engagement. It's the speaker in front of a group, seeing everyone in real time, no computer-related sound issues, everyone sitting at the same table. It's giving accessibility to a significant degree. It's giving full attention, people writing down notes. It's giving proximity, everything that is important for effective engagement in this setting. So, but community engagement looks like many other things too, like block parties, holiday parties, neighborhood garage sales, environmental cleanups. Can you really see these events? All of these were essential means of building community. But neighborhood association meetings deserve special emphasis because that's where the planning of most of these events took place. Through our research, IndieVice has become acutely aware of the importance for neighborhoods to meet, the successes neighborhoods gained from such meetings, and even challenges that existed before COVID-19 changed everything. I'll give the floor to Olivia to speak more on that.
Thank you so much, Brandy. To determine what challenges neighborhood associations were facing before the pandemic, NPI2021 interviewed neighborhood leaders from 5 Indianapolis communities. From these conversations, we learned about certain problems in neighborhood engagement that existed prior to the pandemic and how they've created barriers in connecting residents to their neighborhood, community-based resources, as well as the neighborhood organizations that serve them. Next slide, please. So low residential attendance at monthly meetings was already a concern for some neighborhood organizations. And some of our interviewees believe that a divide among homeowners and renters in their neighborhoods accounted for some of this disconnect. Renters might have the impression that their opinions are of lesser value just because they don't own a parcel of the neighborhood. Other factors, such as generational differences and ineffective communication between organizers and residents, have been attributed to neighborhood leaders feeling a sense of burnout and stagnancy in their community's mobilization efforts. I will now let Adiola elaborate on some additional engagement challenges the neighborhood leaders mentioned in these interviews.
Thank you, Olivia. As we all know, the community is an important entity in development and growth of the society, but the community members are always the experts of their own lives and needs and are better positioned to advise and strategize on advancement plan within the community. The community leaders are resilient and are always finding solutions to their immediate problem. I'll be discussing the general disinterest in engaging with the community. First, we have the preconception and attitude within the community. Positive attitude towards community activities are decreased. Pessimistic attitude is increasingly causing setback in community activities. People aren't excited about their involvement, then they probably won't invest very much of themselves. Second, we have the resistance leaders. Perhaps people who are affected by the problem see their leaders as resistant to their getting involved. Leaders are not willing to rethink their agenda according to citizens' input and are not able to listen and find through on activity. We also have the problem of COVID-19. As we all know, especially here in the US, the pandemic of the COVID-19 has already prevented people within the community from gathering. Mass gathering and large community events bring people from multiple communities into close contact with each other and have the potential to increase COVID-19 transmission. This gathering for the community advancement is gradually declining because people fear transmission of COVID-19. We also have limited experience. People may avoid becoming involved in simply because they aren't even having experience with collective actions and therefore are unfamiliar with what will be expected of them, how they can make a difference, or whether they will be welcome. Many people participate in an unfairly ways, such as attending a neighborhood meeting, which may cause anxiety. And lastly, we have history of unproductive meeting. From past experience with unproductive meeting, this makes people skeptic about the effectiveness of meeting in general, and this causes decline in participation. I'll be calling on Olivia again, who is going to be talking more on some of those challenges.
Thank you so much, Adiola. Additionally, a lack of resources has created obstacles in community engagement for neighborhood associations in Indianapolis. One neighborhood in particular mentioned not having a set meeting location as a major challenge. Additionally, a lack of monetary funding was also expressed as a major factor that prevented organizations from reaching their intended goals. Accessibility to neighborhood meetings was another issue that organizations were aware of prior to the pandemic. Residents who do not have traditional work schedules weren't able to make it to meetings that were held in the evenings, as well as single parents or residents with mobility issues. Lastly, residents who don't have access to the internet, laptops, or specifically the neighborhood's social media pages are in the dark about community meetings and happenings. Considering these existing challenges in neighborhood engagement and how the pandemic has exacerbated many of them, it is increasingly important that neighborhood leaders learn new virtual techniques to mobilize their efforts and engage with residents during these unprecedented times. NPI2021 has worked to find sustainable and accessible solutions for community engagement during the pandemic. I will now let Pablo talk about our efforts in determining resources and best practices for engaging with residents during this virtual age.
Thank you, Olivia. COVID-19 has taken a toll on marginalized communities in greater numbers than most due to socioeconomic and environmental vulnerabilities that existed long before the pandemic. Immigrant, Black, Indigenous, and communities consisting of color, people of color, are just some examples. An important question you may be asking yourself is how to build back trust with these neighbors. One of the first things you can do next slide, please. One of the first things you can do when reaching out to these communities is to listen. Get to know what the neighbors are talking about, their priorities, their goals, and their concerns. Communities vary in communication preferences, like preferring WhatsApp over Facebook. I'm so sorry. Something was wrong with I'll pick up where I was supposed to be going. So to accomplish this, okay. So basically our TSP set out to get a good idea of what our neighborhoods were dealing with in particular and what we can do to help. To accomplish this, we reached out to 11 community leaders from 5 different neighborhoods and asked how they continued their engagement efforts and how COVID-19 has forced them to adjust their normal operations. Feedback we received was common across the board. Engagement is low, technological barriers are prevalent, and communication efforts often fail before they begin or wither out with time. On the slide, you will see a few of the things we heard in our interviews. Interest was already wavering before the pandemic, and now it's even worse. When referencing engagement, since switching to digital meetings, they lost some of the older folks to in the neighborhood, and even some of the people on the board who are unable to attend meetings due to being unable to navigate the technology. And initially we had 30 members, but due to the pandemic, we only had 12 members. Next slide, please. Local interviews gave us an idea of what was happening in our neighborhoods and the problems they are facing. To learn more about the strategies and solutions other communities have devised for similar problems, we did internet research on community engagement practices during COVID-19. Our sources include the Urban Institute, Harvard's Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation, and the Colorado Office of Health Equity, and more. Upon completing our research, we compiled an archive of solutions and strategies to encourage community engagement in a safe, responsible way. In addition to this, we found important background advice that we feel would benefit Indianapolis neighborhood organizers who seek to reach all corners of their community. We will now be reviewing some of the helpful information we found. To start us off on our findings, we will talk about reaching out to communities that are often overlooked. Next slide, please. COVID-19 has taken a toll on marginalized communities in greater numbers than most due to socioeconomic and environmental vulnerabilities that existed long before the pandemic. Immigrant, Black, Indigenous, and communities consisting of people of color are just some examples. An important question you may be asking yourself is how to build back trust with these neighbors. One of the first things to do when reaching out to these communities is to listen. Get to know what the neighbors are talking about, their priorities, their goals, and their concerns. Communities vary in communication preferences, like preferring WhatsApp over Facebook. So if you have information you'd like to share with them, try to utilize the technologies that are already working for them. Sometimes it's necessary to consider what language some neighbors prefer. If people in a community are more comfortable in Burmese, but all the messaging they are receiving from the neighborhood organizations is in English, they may be more prone to ignoring that message. Translating messages, even if you can only make short, simple translations, can make all the difference in catching the eye of a neighbor. Next slide, please. Rely on already made and trusted networks, including faith-based leaders and community-based organizations, who have the added benefit of already being familiar with the needs of the community. Basically, many times these organizations are already doing good work, so consider supporting their efforts. What is perhaps most important is to give people at the margins of society the agency they deserve, because so often this agency is promised but not delivered. Keep in mind that racial and xenophobic systems of oppression have plagued BIPOC and immigrant communities long before the pandemic. Often organizers are discouraged when initial communication is unsuccessful. Keep reaching out and be creative in your approach. Now, Olivia will cover another group of people, persons living with disabilities.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Although the COVID-19 pandemic may prevent neighborhood meetings from happening in person, the virtual age has created more accessible means of engaging with residents who are living with disabilities. It is necessary for organizations to ensure equal access to their meetings for all residents, and if possible, neighborhood leaders should try to find out the accessibility needs of residents before conducting their meetings. If residents need assistance in accessing community events or meetings, find local agencies or organizations that can assist them in doing so. Focus on creating perceivable information that is available in multiple formats to suit users' requirements or limitations. To guarantee meeting access to visually impaired residents, be sure to convert documents to plain text, which is a format that can be translated to Braille. Software programs like PowerPoint, Excel, and Word let users save a plain text version. Prepare a text-friendly explanation of any graphics or complex visuals, so anyone who's unable to see these graphics can still understand the information clearly. Platforms should be compatible with technologies like screen readers to ensure full access. Next slide, please. I'm now going to suggest some options for accommodating hearing impaired residents. If possible, neighborhood associations could hire an ASL interpreter for meetings and events to accommodate deaf or hearing impaired residents. Organizations should utilize platforms that offer captions. Zoom and Google Meet are two options that now have captioning that we recommend using. Live or real-time captioning can be planned in advance, and information needs to be easily navigable by all people to ensure full understanding. If residents will be more comfortable with concrete documents, be sure to disperse them prior to the meeting happening. Utilizing accommodating services benefits everyone in a variety of situations. I will now let Haley talk to you about how to navigate Zoom specifically and how to maneuver its accessibility offerings.
Thank you. So Zoom is an amazing resource for connecting with your community, and it offers a lot of great options to make your meetings or webinars more accessible, but honestly, its settings are a little extensive and can be kind of confusing. We've highlighted some of those settings for this presentation to really break down how you can optimize your Zoom meetings or webinars. Next slide, please. First off, let's talk about security. Security is important on Zoom, especially when you're sharing the link to your Zoom calls publicly. One of the great tools Zoom has is the waiting room feature, which allows for you to know who exactly is coming into your Zoom room, and you can allow or deny them entry from there. It does not require people who are joining the meeting or webinar to do anything other than clicking the link to join. But one flaw with this is that you may not always know who will be coming to your meetings. With that, an alternative form of security that you could use is setting up a passcode so that only those people you sent the passcode to can join the call. If you turn on the setting to embed the passcode into the invite link, it will only take those people one click for them to join. Next slide, please. And while both of those security options can be used in great and creative ways to keep your meetings or webinars secure, ultimately with posting any Zoom information on a public platform, you have to be prepared for possible Zoom bombing. If you're unfamiliar with the term, Zoom bombing means that someone will join your Zoom room, meeting, or webinar, and they may play loud music, say inappropriate things, annotate inappropriate things on the screen, or show inappropriate things on the camera. Zoom bombing can be overwhelming and even scary. You can most likely prevent it by adjusting various settings. There are settings that can prevent removed participants from rejoining the call, limit who can share their screen and who can annotate the screen, and require permission for people to unmute themselves. Next slide, please. Next, I wanted to highlight a few of these listed cool features that you can use to communicate with those who are attending your Zoom meeting or webinar. First of all, the chat feature is a great function for communicating with those in the Zoom room without having to unmute yourself and possibly talk over each other. Though there is no way for a host to monitor one-on-one chats if they do choose to leave that feature enabled. In addition to the chat, participants can also use reactions or emojis in Zoom to express nonverbal feedback. Lastly, there's the end of meeting experience feedback. You can make it so that the participants can select thumbs up or thumbs down to describe their experience, or alternatively, you could provide a survey. Next slide, please. Another great feature in Zoom is the remote support option. This is a setting that allows you to have remote control over someone's computer screen. This is an amazing feature for helping people navigate through technology when they may be struggling. Because of that, we will definitely be elaborating more on this feature in our final project. Next slide, please. So thinking back to Pablo and Olivia's section earlier, here are some great features that Zoom has in terms of making your meetings more accessible. First off, Zoom has a pretty good auto captioning program, which allows you to have fairly accurate live subtitles during a meeting, and you can even save those subtitles as transcriptions to read for later. Excuse me. Next, if you have a translator present in the meeting, Zoom has a feature which allows the host to assign participants as interpreters, which allows people to choose to listen to that interpreter's audio and/or have them as the main focus on the screen. Also, just be sure that the group HD video option is turned off in the settings to make it easier for those with a less stable internet connection. Lastly, provide a join from browser link, which would just allow people to join the Zoom even if they are unable to download Zoom. Next slide, please. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was how you can reach more people by hosting your meeting or webinar across multiple platforms. Through Zoom, you can host the meeting or webinar on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, which is amazing for those people who just may not be able to get the hang of Zoom. This is especially great if you have your own Facebook or YouTube page, where it will give those who are subscribed or a part of the group a notification when the webinar or meeting is happening. Speaking of Facebook pages, Catherine will now talk about the great ways you can utilize Facebook and other social media in order to reach more people with what you're doing. Catherine.
In community engagement, we always hear the admonition, meet people where they're at. During the pandemic, more than ever, that's online. As you can see from these graphs, most adults in the US are on Facebook and YouTube. Even those who have largely abandoned Facebook for everyday interactions still depend on it for engaging with local groups, organizations, and businesses. Next slide. Every neighborhood association should have a Facebook page. Unlike neighborhood groups that are often overrun with discussions about cleaning up dog poop and the ever-popular trivia game, gunshots or fireworks, Facebook pages allow you to control tone and content by establishing who can post to the page. Make sure to create a social media code of conduct for neighborhood leadership and community rules for commenting on the page. This will help neighborhood leaders avoid getting sucked into the mire of social media conflict and create transparency about how the page is managed. Make sure to fill out the background information on the page to help Facebook target your neighborhood audience. Once you have your page all set up, you should take a few moments to help bring neighbors to your page. Invite neighbors to like your page, like neighborhood businesses and organizations' pages. This will help boost the visibility of your page for others who like those pages. And join neighborhood groups as the page. This is a good place for social listening and to share your page's events and updates. Next slide. To ensure that your page's posts reach the largest possible number of neighbors, you need to work the algorithm. Facebook prioritizes what it deems to be high-quality content, posts with high-quality pictures or videos, or links to articles from established news sources. Make sure to use hashtags and tag local businesses and organizations to broaden your post's reach. Establish your page as a trusted source of information by posting regularly. If you visit a page and they haven't posted anything since last year's spring cleanup, you're not going to trust that anything on that page is up to date. I'd recommend posting at least once a week, but not more than once a day. You needn't create all of this content yourself, though. You can share events and posts from other neighborhood businesses to create a centralized hub of what's happening in your neighborhood. Finally, boost your posts by interacting with them. Whenever your page posts, make sure all neighborhood leaders like and share, comment, and reply. Next slide. How are you going to handle all of this? Luckily, there are some apps that can help your neighborhood better utilize social media. With apps like Hootsuite, you can schedule social media posts so that sending out reminders of neighborhood meetings and events can be just a periodic task. Hootsuite also allows you to monitor social media pages for keywords and mentions. Free accounts can monitor up to 3 pages or groups and can help you keep on top of what is being said about your neighborhood on social media. Google Alerts will help you stay up to date when your neighborhood is in the news. Next slide. WhatsApp is a video and calling app with simple phone-like controls. You can have up to 4 people per group call, and reduced data needs and simple controls make it a great alternative for smaller meetings with those who may have difficulty accessing Zoom. Next slide. Sharing recordings of virtual community meetings on social media can help people who can't make it to live meetings get involved and stay up to date. But you should protect the privacy of those who attend your meetings by limiting the accessibility of your video online. When posting to YouTube, keep your neighborhood channel and videos unlisted. This will ensure that only those with the link can find it. Also, if you share the video link or video itself on your neighborhood's Facebook page, set the target audiences before posting so that it cannot be shared beyond your neighborhood. Next slide. Slack is a virtual workplace that allows you to organize all communications by project or idea. Slack saves relevant documents and communications in a searchable channel, and nonprofit organizations can get a standard account for free. Next slide. You may be wondering how you're going to learn all these new technologies. Here's the great news. You don't have to. I guarantee there are people in your neighborhood who already have these skills and want to get involved. Next slide. So we repeatedly heard about difficulties in getting younger neighbors involved in neighborhood leadership. 77% of millennials volunteer in their community, but younger neighbors will likely be unengaged in the stereotypical neighborhood meeting, dominated by a preset agenda and Robert's rules. Your younger neighbors bring different assets and preferences to community engagement than older generations did. Millennials like to be involved in decision-making and are motivated by impact and connection. Gen Z are highly entrepreneurial and like independent work. They're motivated by creating social capital in their neighborhood. Not every tool to help us connect during the pandemic relies on new technology. Brandy will illustrate how some old school, people-powered social networking techniques can be of use during social distancing.
Thank you. So you don't always need computer-based technology to stay connected when in-person meetings are not a possibility. There are effective ways to communicate with your neighbors that are less heavy on computer use. Take this Help OK system, for example. Someone by the name of Sergio Zamora shared this idea on the internet for folks to implement in their own neighborhoods. The concept is for residents to display a sign. It can just be a piece of paper and in an easily visible window. The sign would display the word "okay" or "help." Designated volunteers will travel up and down the streets to look for anyone who has displayed a sign that says "help," and ideally a phone number that the volunteer would then call to speak directly with the person in need while maintaining a safe distance from the actual person. Pablo will now introduce another option for communication.
So when seeking a quick and effective form of communication that is accessible, it's hard to find something that's better than a phone tree. A phone tree consists of a group of people that are ready to personally contact individual community members to spread a consistent message using a preset structure. To start this off, you compile a list of phone numbers of the people that you are looking to reach out to. Next, you need to recruit a small group of responsible folks to be your key group of communicators. Once your key group of communicators is set, you divide the list, the phone number list into groups so that each communicator is responsible for one group. That way, when a message needs to be spread throughout the community, the key group will personally contact folks and be ready to report back in a timely fashion. This strategy could be used for mobilizing or notifying neighbors, increasing turnout in meetings, or simply saving on printing and postage. We saw its usefulness on display in Texas recently when groups checked in on elderly neighbors using a similar strategy. Phone trees are easy to put together, generally very accessible to community members, and easy to activate when needed. Now, Brandy will build on a different way to use phone trees that centers on building community and mental wellness.
Thank you. As Pablo was saying, phone trees can be an efficient way of keeping neighbors connected. It's a practice of community care. One community, not in Indy, but actually in Maryland, took that system to the next level. I thought it would be worth sharing the Baltimore Neighbors Network. As quoted from their website, the Baltimore Neighbors Network provides a virtual community of trained volunteers to offer hope, comfort, and social solidarity. We also enlist pro bono clinicians to help address the looming epidemic of loneliness and isolation that COVID-19 will create. Baltimore's greatest asset is our people. We are the medicine. Baltimore Neighbors Network volunteers who must be living in the Baltimore metro area make calls through a web program that mags their personal phone numbers. And they make these calls to seniors to assess their well-being and offer resources and create critical connections. Seniors are then invited to join the Neighbors Network and provide peer-to-peer support. So not only does information cycle through the community, some neighbors have the opportunity to fill the needs of other neighbors. There is much to be said about the efficacy of telephone networks. I hope these case studies have gotten your gears turning. Now I will pass it on to Ayanna.
28,514,774 total cases. The United States COVID-19 cases reported to the CDC as of March 3rd, 2021. 515,277 deaths. That is the United States COVID-19 deaths reported to the CDC as of March 3rd, 2021. With the number of positive cases rising daily, social distancing is the new normal. Virtual community engagement isn't going anywhere anytime soon. That is why it is so important to keep neighbors, community organizations in touch with the resources they need. That is the work of the Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center is committed to doing tirelessly. Mari, our wonderful neighborhood development director, is just one of the several INRC staff members who is here to help your neighborhood stay a neighborhood. The INRC tasked us with creating a sustainable solution to conducting neighborhood business in a virtual format. Together, our team has researched, interviewed, and brainstormed. Now we understand the needs and, in particular, what we can do to help. We must remain cognizant of the dire need for community engagement. Pablo will now share the ways in which we intend to do our part.
Thank you. We intend to produce a final product that would help people in Indianapolis increase community engagement in a safe, cost-effective way. This will come in the form of a handbook that is meant specifically for Indianapolis neighbors to boost community engagement in times of COVID. This handbook will contain background information, strategies, and helpful resources that we found when doing our research. We aim for this handbook to be available by the end of April. Interested parties will be able to download it for free from the INRC website. Next slide, please. Another project we are aiming to complete will be our QR code sticker postcard idea. For this to play out the way we wanted to, we would be applying for funding to print out stickers or postcards like the one pictured on the slide, then distribute them across Indianapolis to public areas like community centers, neighborhood associations, public libraries, etc. The QR code would link to a website with resources for Indianapolis residents like findhelp.org, a website where you can find food assistance, help paying bills, and other free and reduced cost programs, including new programs for the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Neighbors must be able to rely on each other, especially in times of great hardship. We hope the presentation makes you feel more equipped to support your communities and reach out to your neighbors. Look out for our handbook coming near the end of April and potentially for our QR code products. We would like to thank the INRC for helping us out with this product, especially our supervisor Maury, the community leaders for their invaluable input, and for everyone who attended today's presentation. We hope you continue to enjoy more amazing presentations that Neighbor Power has to offer.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Before you move to the main floor for the keynote address, we'd appreciate it if you take a few moments to give us your feedback about what information we should include in our community resource, the tools and assets we should use to disseminate the information, and how you envision using the information learned here today. Next slide. In a moment, I'm going to share an interactive whiteboard with 3 areas on it. In the first area, you'll find a survey where you can rate the usefulness of the information provided in each topic area by clicking in the upper left corner. Clicking once will add a vote, clicking again will remove it. To navigate to different areas of the board for commenting, you can use the Areas button in the lower right-hand corner, which will open a menu where you can click to center that area of the whiteboard. Or you can use the Minimap button, also in the lower right corner, to orient yourself to the whiteboard and drag a different area into view. Once you've found the topic you want to comment on, click on the Stickies button or use the key command N and click in the area you want to add a sticky note. Use the thumbs up button in the Stickies toolbar to allow others to agree with your idea. Other buttons allow you to change the color of the sticky or make it bigger if your comment is long. I've also set tags that correlate to different topic areas. If you're having trouble navigating the whiteboard, you can use these tags to indicate what you're commenting on. If you'd like to comment on another person's idea, do so on a sticky note. You can connect the 2 notes by clicking on a blue dot next to your note and then clicking on the other note. Yes, so I'm going to share it now. And if we have questions in the side, we can address them while people are using the whiteboard. So it is now shared. Let me see here. Okay, mostly just thanks for the accessibility things.
So, Captain, did you want to give any instruction as we navigate the whiteboard?
So it's basically it's designed to be kind of like if we were in an in-person meeting and people have those big white sticky things that people put on wall and go and put your comments about different things. So there's different areas described for each of the topic areas that we presented on, so that you can stick your sticky note on the poster board basically that corresponds with the area that you're commenting on. And we have a question about, can you give some examples of giving agency? But I'm not sure exactly what is meant by that. Let me see if I can.
I would say that Pablo mentioned briefly about the importance of allowing people, especially in the marginalized communities, allowing them to still be in control of their communities and ways in which aid is delivered or shared. So maybe he will be able to answer that more.
I can't think of any specific example at the moment, but I would just say that I guess in a hypothetical situation, not giving agency can look like prioritizing a project without looking into what the majority of neighbors want to see, or prioritizing a project while the majority of neighbors have other like priorities or goals or interests. So I would say agency often looks like prioritizing the goals of those members, and not only that, but making sure those members are still a continual part of that process and decision making when it comes to what's happening to their neighborhood. A lot of times, especially in marginalized communities, I think people know, but they just assume they know what's best and go and start trying to do that. And that would definitely be an example of what agency doesn't look like.
If you're having trouble getting into the whiteboard, there's like 4 arrows on the side that'll make it bigger. And yeah, if you click on those, it should take you in there.
It seems to be once our participants are in the whiteboard that the difficulty may be moving the sticky notes to the place that they'd like to move. So can you touch on that, please?
So there are two things. You can either hit N and then double click where you want to hit your sticky note, or you can click on the sticky note button on the toolbar and then double click where you want to place the sticky note. I think it's a double click. It might be a single click.
Can we upvote if we double click
so it seems people are okay. So it seems people are having trouble. So let's go with Sharon's suggestion. And just if you have comments, just put them in the chat.
Thank you, Catherine. It's really innovative.
Can zoom in and out of it, the zoom board. So if it's taking up most of your screen, you can zoom out. And oh yeah, when you open that thingy. So Lisa, when you, if you can't get the areas section to shut, you might just shut the whiteboard and go back out and just use the little mini map to navigate around.
Okay, so we have questions coming in on the chat now.
So in terms of reaching, so questions when it comes to wanting to reach out to underrepresented communities, I would say starting off with community-based organizations that are already in those communities, and they don't necessarily have to be a neighborhood organization. A little, like I said, like faith-based leaders are really big in some marginalized communities. Looking into organizations that often are helping out communities. For example, the immigration, if you're reaching out to immigrant communities, it might be helpful to look into the Immigrant Welcome Center because they might already have some connections that are already there. So the organizations that might have connections in that community are not in that community already. They could be just like a big organization in Indianapolis that are working with some of those community members. And all of that stuff, all of that information, all that background information, all the resources that we found is going to be in the handbook.
So Emily, we'd be happy to hear, like if this gets your gears kind of grinding, any ideas? Because I know that you've done a lot of information work with the with your placement. That if this gets any ideas going, feel free to offer those ideas, because we appreciate it.
So in regards to Emily's question, we have also thought about printing out the handbook. But we are prioritizing at least making it a PDF that is accessible for free on the INRC website, so that it is as accessible as possible, especially in this time when people aren't trying to get in contact with folks. But we're looking into ways to print out the handbook as well in a cost-effective way, especially for folks who might not have access to the handbook online.
We've been working, Connie, in response to your question, we've been working with Maury, who is the primary neighborhood organization contact at INRC. So once we are ready to distribute, we will definitely have that list to work with. And so, yes. Thank you, everybody. I believe if you're in the whiteboard, you will stay there, but I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation so people can chat in tables and things like that. Thank you so much for coming today.
A question.
Oh, okay. Oh, I think it was just a great job.
Yeah.